Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these are today's headlines from the past. On this day, the 22nd of October, 1797, the first parachute jump was made by André Jacques Garnerin, or Garnerin. Forgive me if I have mispronounced his name. He jumped from a balloon 6,000 feet above the Parc Monceau in Paris. And continuing on this interesting date, on this very day in 1883, the Metropolitan Opera House in New York was open for business, or well, open for opera season. A significant moment in the history of American art and in the history of opera in the United States of America. The Met Opera Hall is also one of the most iconic sights to see while one is in New York. It is a beautiful and ornate building. And continuing on this very day, in 1909, Elise de Roche, who used the self-created title Baron de la Roche, became the first woman to fly solo. She was the world's first qualified female pilot. An interesting moment in the history of aviation, and she would be a trendsetter in the history of female aviators. Moving forward, on this very day in 1930, the BBC Symphony Orchestra played their first concert conducted by Sir Adrian Boult at the Queen's Hall in London. A significant moment in the history of the British Broadcasting Corporation, as its orchestra was also best known for producing and releasing the hits of the time. As part of the Cold War Museum's collection, there is a vinyl that they produced of some of the jazz hits of the time. Definitely, the BBC's orchestra was one of the most qualified in the general radio orchestras or broadcasting corporation orchestras that were there at the time. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis began when President Kennedy announced a naval blockade of Cuba when he maintained the belief that the Soviet Union or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had set up missiles and installations in Cuba that were threatening the mainland United States of America. The crisis would be one of the closest points of nuclear tension to which the world would come to a standstill in the history of the Cold War. And on this very day in 1962, Nelson Mandela's treason trial began in South Africa, to which he pleaded not guilty. Nelson Mandela is one of the most well remembered and one of the most iconic figures in the global history of the civil rights movements. It was his movement and his non-cooperation that eventually brought the horrid policies of apartheid to an end. Now we move on to the next segment of our show where we recount the famous births and deaths of famous figures from the 19th and 20th centuries and sometimes earlier. Born on this day, the 22nd of October 1811, was Franz Liszt. Franz Liszt was a famous Hungarian and Austrian composer who is best remembered for composing some of the most iconic pieces in the history of European classical music. And unfortunately, on this very day in 1906, Paul Cézanne, French impressionist, passed away. His death would be mourned by the impressionist art world on this very day, the 22nd of October 1906. And on that unfortunate note, we conclude today's headlines of the day. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these were today's headlines as history first heard them. Good night.